Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel, Romel, Private Investigator. I'm Romel. My company is Access Diversified Investigations, Inc., and it is a New York State licensed private investigative agency. In brief, I'm a retired peace officer, having served in government as an officer and investigator and interacting among several law enforcement agencies. I am a long-standing member of the New York City Assigned Counsel Plan, where I am listed on their roster of expert investigators. This is a government agency associated with providing court-appointed attorneys, doctors, investigators, and other professionals to assist in representing persons qualifying for this assistance. In this video, I will be talking about what it is that private investigators do. Take a look. Private investigators, private investigators do a lot of things. There are a lot of things that they are lawfully entitled to do. Pretty much similar to some things you would expect from different law enforcement agencies. The difference, however, is there's no enforcement attached to the duties or, let's say, the responsibilities or the undertakings of a private investigator. So you're looking at criminal matters, all kinds, homicides, theft, just about any criminal act for the most part that you can think of. A private investigator can engage in that work. In some cases, people are concerned that maybe the police are overloaded. They can't give them the attention that they need for a particular instance in the family. And so people will hire a private investigator to fill that void. Now, you also have civil work, domestic work, the family courts, people trying to find persons, searches, background checks, all different types of surveillance, countermeasures. Private investigators, at least in the state of New York, I would imagine for the most part, any place else where there's a license required, and in some states they don't require a license, but this is the type of work that private investigators can lawfully do. Some go as far as to have a niche, so to speak, in one particular aspect of those things that they can do. But surprisingly, almost anything that you can think of is something that you may find a need to have a private investigator take a look at. You will find private investigators in just about almost any community that you can imagine, from affluent to those who are disadvantaged. And basically their responsibility, at least their efforts, are geared towards gathering as much information as possible, certainly tying links of one sort to get to a central point or a group of central points that will be evaluated, analyzed, and assessed at a later time in conjunction with some other information that may already be available. So, you'll find private investigators in hospitals, you'll find them in and out of courts. Insurance companies use private investigators associated with accident reconstruction, various interviews, the taking of statements, activity checks, workers' compensation, and more. In addition to that, you have private businesses in terms of situations where you have employees who are perhaps conducting some fraudulent or at least criminal activity, some activities associated with policy violations. Nonetheless, you have government agencies, the insurance fund, workers' compensation. You have the Department of State. They keep a check on their licensed investigators or persons who, let's say, practicing without a license. So you have a lot that's done associated with the private investigative industry. And of course, for if you're a private investigator, you probably know this. If not, you may have some idea, but for the average public, a lot of people are not really certain as to what private investigators do. And for the most part, they do a lot more than most people would imagine. Now, if we consider or we look at criminal matters, some will concern themselves with what do investigators do in those situations. Well, first and foremost, you're going to meet with the attorney. The attorney will give you his or her concerns with respect to what they may want you to do. Now, as a good investigator, obviously you do listen to the attorney. However, you must keep in mind that the attorney is not an investigator any more than you are an attorney. And respectfully, there are other considerations that you need to keep in mind. Interviewing the family, for one thing. Now, some investigators, for one reason or another, that's something that not all investigators do. They tend to stick directly in line with one or more specifics given by the attorney. And that's all well and good. However, a thorough investigation is critical in any matter, especially criminal matters where people have their freedom at stake. And so interviewing the family will help you to get a better picture of who the defendant is, which is important. You will normally get some discovery information given to the attorney by the prosecutor, and it's good to review that information. I generally ask an attorney to present his entire or her entire file so that I can get a better sense of what I'm working with. For some of you who may be new at investigations or someone looking to become an investigator, it's also, in my view, very important that you do consider and look and review the motions made by the attorney. A lot of them are fairly standard in criminal cases, but you should be familiar with those motions. They have everything to do with how that case may ultimately be resolved. As you engage yourself in the investigative process, being familiar with that information will help you a lot with the information or evidences that you gather throughout your process, the process of your investigation. And so the family will oftentimes know friends, and friends will oftentimes know a bit more than the family. Certainly playgrounds, hangouts, areas of that sort, an investigator would review those areas, speak to people in those areas, because they have a lot to do, not only with the defendant, sometimes the environment alone. The information submitted by the prosecutor, there may be something in that information that's inconsistent with what you see when you get out to the area of the incident or occurrence, if you will. So again, it's very detailed. The object is to be as thorough as you can, and certainly a person has their freedom at stake, and that's a very challenging place to be. In another investigative area, what about accidents? You will sometimes have an attorney representing a claim of some sort, and they want to get some particulars associated with an accident. The accident may be as far back as 3 months, 4 months, sometimes even a year. And so, obviously, you will do interviews, you will speak with people. Oftentimes, in speaking with people, when you're able, it's important to actually get a written statement by that individual, have them sign off on whatever commentary they have. But also, as you look, let's say slip and fall, you're looking at stairwells, stairways. A person's claiming they tripped over a certain part of the stairwell. Generally, some of that information would be available with respect to pictures that were taken early on. However, it's important to keep in mind when pictures are taken, they should be in context with what actually happened. If a person is telling you they slipped and they fell, it's important to know how it happened, as much as they could remember. What were they doing? Were they turning in any given direction? Because oftentimes when someone gets to the scene, the authorities and or any other persons associated therein, they will take pictures in terms of just getting the pictures in. But what's important is to know what was going on at the time the person slipped or that the person fell. Obviously, any witnesses. It's not just the idea that they witnessed what happened. That's simply not enough. Where were they? What was their view like? Did they themselves have any distractions? And just to be a bit more detailed, let's say there's an incident with a car crash. And obviously one person is going to say the other person did something that person didn't do, or perhaps they felt the person didn't do. So what's important when you're asking questions is something as simple as, you heard a big boom. Well, people will say that. I heard a big bang, a big boom. And so one of the questions I normally will ask is, did you hear anything before the big bang or the big boom? Now, clearly what I'm looking to find out is whether there was any screeching. Obviously, if there was some screeching, presumably someone was trying to stop or perhaps avoid the incident. So in some cases, you may hear someone say they didn't hear a screech at all. And in interviewing the different parties associated with the accident, you may find they all basically say the same thing. So that's certainly going to look like you have a situation where a crash took place, nobody applied the brakes. Or if in fact the brakes were applied, it was at the very, let's say just a split second before there was actually an impact. So again, these things, as simple as they may seem, they're critical, and some people don't think of them. Did you hear anyone honk a horn? That's important. That's an alert of some sort, and that can have some critical meaning. So investigators do a lot. They do a lot. Well, that about wraps it up for now, and I'd like to leave you with a very meaningful thought. Dream with purpose, act with intent. And of course, remember to subscribe again, share with your friends.